Day 29, Becoming the Author of Your Life. As we approach the end of this 30-day journey, it is worth pausing for a moment and looking back at everything we have explored together. Over the past 4 weeks, we have discussed limiting beliefs, self-awareness, fear, discipline, habits, confidence, resilience, responsibility, relationships, and many of the psychological patterns that influence the way people think and behave. Although each chapter focused on a different aspect of personal growth, they have all been moving toward the same idea. The quality of your life is shaped less by what happens to you and more by the meaning you give to what happens. This does not mean circumstances are irrelevant. They are not. Every person encounters challenges they did not choose. Some people begin life with advantages that others do not have. Unexpected difficulties appear. Plans fail. Opportunities are lost. Disappointments occur. To pretend otherwise would ignore reality. However, if you look carefully at people who have managed to create meaningful, fulfilling lives, you will often notice something interesting. They rarely spend much time arguing with reality. They do not waste years wishing the past had been different or insisting that life should be easier. Instead, they gradually learn to work with the circumstances they have rather than the circumstances they wish they had. This ability is more powerful than it may initially appear. Many people unknowingly spend a significant portion of their lives reacting. They react to criticism. They react to setbacks. They react to difficult emotions. They react to other people's opinions and expectations. Because they are constantly reacting, they rarely stop to ask whether the direction of their life is being chosen intentionally or simply shaped by whatever happens around them. Imagine a small boat drifting in the middle of the sea. If nobody takes control of the steering, the boat will still move. Wind, currents, and weather conditions will determine its direction. The passengers may remain busy throughout the journey, but activity alone does not guarantee progress toward a chosen destination. Life often works in a similar way. People can remain incredibly busy while moving in a direction they never consciously selected. They meet expectations. They follow routines. They respond to responsibilities. Years pass. Then one day, they begin asking themselves a difficult question. How did I end up here? The answer is usually not a single decision. It is the accumulation of many small decisions that were never examined closely enough. This is why self-awareness matters so much. Throughout this book, we have repeatedly returned to the idea that awareness creates choice. Until you become aware of a belief, it influences you automatically. Until you recognize a habit, you continue repeating it. Until you notice a pattern, the pattern continues directing your behavior. Once awareness enters the picture, something changes. You begin seeing alternatives. You start recognizing that many of the things you assumed were permanent may actually be changeable. You realize that thoughts are not always facts, emotions are not always instructions, and past experiences do not always predict future outcomes. This realization creates freedom. Not complete freedom, because life will always contain limitations, responsibilities, and circumstances beyond your control. But it creates enough freedom to influence the direction of your life. And that influence matters. One of the most damaging misconceptions in personal development is the belief that major life changes happen through dramatic moments of inspiration. While breakthrough moments certainly exist, most meaningful transformations happen much more quietly. A person begins speaking differently to themselves. They start taking responsibility for things they previously avoided. They become more intentional about their habits. They learn to tolerate discomfort rather than escaping from it. They make slightly better decisions repeatedly over time. None of these actions appears extraordinary in isolation. Yet together, they gradually reshape a person's life. The process resembles the way a large ship changes direction. The adjustment at the beginning may be almost invisible. For a while, everything appears the same. But as distance accumulates, the difference becomes impossible to ignore. The same principle applies to personal growth. A new habit may seem insignificant today. A healthier belief may appear small. One difficult conversation may not feel life-changing. Yet these actions influence future actions, which influence future decisions, which eventually influence future outcomes. Life is often shaped in this quiet and gradual manner. Perhaps this is why taking ownership of your story is so important. Every person carries a narrative about who they are. Some narratives are empowering. Others are limiting. Some were created through personal experience. Others were inherited from family, culture, or past circumstances. The problem is not that these stories exist. The problem occurs when they remain unquestioned. A person may spend years believing they are not confident because of experiences they had as a teenager. Another may believe they are bad with money because of mistakes made years earlier. Someone else may assume they are incapable of success because previous attempts did not go as planned. These stories often feel true because they have been repeated for so long. Yet many of them are simply interpretations, and interpretations can change. One of the most important things you can understand is that your future is not obligated to resemble your past. Your previous mistakes do not automatically determine future decisions. Your old fears do not have to become permanent limitations. The version of yourself that existed 5 years ago does not need to dictate who you become 5 years from now. Growth remains possible for as long as you remain willing to learn. As we reach the final stages of this journey, I would encourage you to think less about the chapters themselves and more about the person who has been reading them. Think about the patterns you have recognized. Think about the beliefs you have challenged. Think about the habits you have begun developing. Think about the areas where you now see possibilities that were previously hidden. These observations matter because personal growth is not ultimately about information. It is about transformation. Information can be forgotten. Transformation changes the way you see yourself and the way you approach life. The purpose of this book was never to provide perfect answers. No book can do that. The purpose was to encourage a different way of thinking, one that allows you to become a more active participant in the story you are creating. Because whether you realize it or not, that story is being written every day. It is written through your decisions. It is written through your habits. It is written through the standards you accept and the actions you repeat. The question is not whether your life is telling a story. The question is whether you are consciously helping to write it. And perhaps that is one of the most important choices any person can make. Reflection questions. 1. What has been the most important lesson you have learned about yourself during this journey? 2. Which belief or habit has changed the most over the past month? 3. What story have you been telling yourself that no longer serves you? 4. What kind of person are you becoming? 5. If you were writing the next chapter of your life intentionally, what would it contain? Daily action step. Spend 20 minutes reflecting on the past 30 days. Write down the most important insights, lessons, and commitments you want to carry forward. Focus less on what you have learned and more on how you intend to apply it. Success affirmation. I am not defined by my past. Through my choices, actions, and mindset, I continue shaping the person I am becoming. I take ownership of my story and move forward with intention, awareness, and purpose.